The Scott Jennings Show is proudly sponsored by Lear Capital. Since 1997, Lear has helped Americans protect their retirement accounts and savings with physical gold and silver. With thousands of five-star reviews and $3 billion in transactions, Lear is who I trust to help me buy gold and silver. Visit LearScott.com.
The voice of free speech. The truth delivered. Common sense for the American people. Welcome to the Scott Jennings Show.
Hello, Americans. It is Monday, and you awoke today to a country where radical Islamic terrorists are throwing IEDs in New York City, and airports are facing TSA lines of 5 hours in some cases. And all the while, Democrats continue to shut down the Department of Homeland Security, which handles both. Plus, this hour, we go long on the Iran war with the most insightful analysts. Congressman Barry Moore from Alabama is here, and we learn from a military expert about the process of a dignified remains transfer, which we saw this weekend when 6 American heroes came home from the Middle East. It is Monday, March the 9th. This is Common Sense for the American people. I'm Scott Jennings, and I'm broadcasting live from New York City, and we'll see you back tonight at 10 o'clock at the debating table with Abby and friends on CNN. Topping the news today, it seems to me that we are living in a country that is whistling past the graveyard when it comes to our safety. In New York City this weekend, 2 radical Islamic jihadists threw IEDs, improvised explosive devices, into a crowd of protesters in front of the mayor's mansion. They were intending to kill those protesters and maim those people and the assembled police officers. But you wouldn't know it from reading the statements of various Democratic politicians or the write-ups from mainstream media outlets. Mayor Mamdani released a statement Sunday intended to make you believe that Islamophobes had done it. Several news outlets wrote wildly inaccurate headlines and then refused to print the names of the Islamic terrorists in their stories. The collusion between Democrats and media to keep you from the truth continues. And of course, these are not trivial matters. Both of those institutions are doing their best to also ignore or obfuscate another serious problem, that the Department of Homeland Security remains shut down while all of this is going on. Oh, that's right. Just days ago, we had a terrorist attack in Austin, Texas, where a radical Islamic terrorist killed 2 people and injured several others. And now this weekend in New York City, another attack. And yet Democrats refuse to vote to open the Department of Homeland Security. If ever there was a time for a Homeland Security Department, now would be it. But I guess Democrats simply don't believe that. But the American people are starting to notice, because airports are starting to crack under the pressure of TSA agents not receiving their paychecks. At Hobby Airport in Houston this weekend, passengers waited in line for hours, and now that airport is asking you to arrive 5 hours before your flight. In Atlanta at Hartsfield, busy airport, same story. This passenger told it like it is in cut number 2.
It's the longest I've ever seen it. I flew into Atlanta several times, and this is by far the longest I've ever seen in my life.
Several other airports are reporting longer lines as TSA staffing shortages become more acute, as these agents are once again asked to work without pay by Democrats who are voting over and over to keep their agency shut down. Here is one of those agents in cut number 1.
We're fed up. We had enough. This is the 3rd shutdown in a matter of 6 months.
Jovan Petkovic has been with TSA for 10 plus years and is based out of Phoenix. He calls the shutdown a huge economic roller coaster.
Houston, Atlanta passengers, how many delays is it? How many flight attendants are being impacted by this because of their flights either being delayed or being canceled out? That means they're not getting paid. If you're not sitting behind the controls as a pilot, you're not getting the paycheck.
The Trump
Jovan Petkovic is a TSA agent who works in Phoenix, speaking with a local Fox affiliate there. The same thing happened last fall. Democrats treated TSA agents like garbage as they shut down the government for 43 days. So how long will this DHS shutdown last? Well, your guess is as good as mine. Democratic leader Hakeem Jeffries continues to blame Republicans, but anyone can look at the vote tallies here. It's Republicans who are voting to open DHS, while Democrats are voting en masse to keep it closed. What Democrats are protesting here with these votes is ICE, the agency that enforces federal immigration laws. And given that illegal immigrants are now the principal constituent group of the Democratic Party, I wouldn't hold my breath for a quick solution. So if you're stuck in an airport line today, just remember the Democratic Party cares more about keeping illegal aliens in America than it cares about you standing in line for the next 5 hours. The dumb part is ICE is already funded until 2029. So the current Democratic tantrum does nothing to stop ICE from doing its job, but it does stop the TSA from doing theirs. And it keeps our Homeland Security apparatus closed as we face increased terror attacks from radical Islamic jihadis in multiple American cities. Oh, the names of the two radical Islamic terrorists in New York City, Emir Balat and Ibrahim Nick. They told police they were inspired by ISIS. Both lived in Pennsylvania. They drove up to New York City. Authorities are searching their homes. They are now in federal custody. And in breaking news, just into the show, Attorney General Pam Bondi says they are both being indicted by the feds. Understand something real, folks. The mayor of New York City, Mamdani, simply cannot tell you the truth about radical Islamic terrorism because he apparently believes it is a justifiable means to an end, that it fits with his worldview, that the oppressed have come to balance the cosmic scales against their oppressors. And his wife, Rama Duwaji, made clear her views on it too, as dozens of posts have come to light wherein she was liking and cheering on the terrorists who committed the atrocities of October the 7th. I encourage you to read Olivia Reingold's reporting in the Free Press about this matter. Oh, and before you chastise me about taking a politician's wife to task, save it. I sat through too many panels and too much hand-wringing over Justice Sam Alito's wife hanging up a George Washington flag on their vacation porch to let Mamdani'S October the 7th loving spouse off the hook. These are their rules. I'm just going to play by them. So inside Gracie Mansion today, two people who excuse, or worse, cheer on radical Islamic terrorists. After October the 7th, New York City's First Lady liked posts calling the atrocities, quote, a mass rape hoax. She literally cheered on the people murdering and raping and killing Israelis and Americans. And now the Mamdani'S have radical Islamic terrorism to deal with in New York City on their watch. And the mayor's first instinct was to lie to his constituents about it. Wake up, America. Your Department of Homeland Security is closed. You are feeling pain in airports across the country. You have terrorist attacks occurring in major cities. And one of the two major political parties and their leaders are choosing to lie to your face about all of it as it unfolds. In other news today, the thing they say never happens has happened again, this time in Pennsylvania. Federal government's arrested an illegal immigrant named Mahadi Sacco for voting in five presidential elections. He was ordered removed from the country in 2000, and yet here he is in 2026 voting in our presidential elections all the while. In Zafrills, Florida, near Tampa, an illegal alien from Guatemala is facing DUI manslaughter charges after killing a 51-year-old motorcyclist. Police say 29-year-old Minor Milian Morales tried to pass in a no-passing zone. He hit an oncoming SUV, triggered a chain reaction involving two trucks, two motorcycles, and the SUV. The illegal alien had a blood alcohol content of 0.106. He did not have a valid driver's license. It's another person who should not have been in our country, and another American who is dead because of it. You're listening to Common Sense for the American People. It's Scott Jennings broadcasting to you on Salem. I need to share with you a listener story. Rod from Texas, he says, I'm 64 years old and I used to build houses, and years of hard physical work left me with excruciating back pain that became unbearable. What did Rod do? He finally gave Relief Factor a try, and within a few weeks, his pain improved. It has nearly subsided entirely. His words were simple. Being pain-free is indescribable. If you are in pain, if you've worked hard your entire life, if you are suffering from back pain, knee pain, other joints, and all you want to do is wake up in the morning and live your life, play with your grandchildren, engage in your hobbies, do the things that you want to do, and do them pain-free, might I recommend Relief Factor? They have a plan called the 3-week quick start. To try it, call 1-800-4RELIEF or go to relieffactor.com. When we come back, we're going to explore the latest revelations about Texas Democrat Senate candidate James Talarico. You won't believe the latest. It's a never-ending stream of weirdness from this guy. Scott Jennings on Salem. Stay with us.
Iran has unleashed missile attacks on Israel, and across the Holy Land today, children are watching the skies for rockets. Mothers and fathers are listening closely for red alert sirens. These sirens give you 15 seconds to get to the nearest bomb shelter. The situation, folks, is serious, and the threat is real. Right now, the International Fellowship of Christians and Jews is on the ground preparing large-scale distributions of life-saving food, first aid, emergency essentials for civilian security personnel, and ensuring hospitals, emergency rooms, and shelters are fully stocked with critical and life-saving medical supplies. Aid is all focused here on protecting Israel's most vulnerable people, the sick, the elderly, children, and families who are in great need. But the fellowship needs your most generous gift today to make this work possible, and now is your time to stand with Israel's most vulnerable. To rush your gift, call 888-488-IFCJ. That's 888-488-IFCJ, or go online at ifcj.org. ifcj.org. Please help this effort today.
The very definition of never back down. Here's Scott Jennings.
It is Monday, March the 9th, and we are continuing to learn more about the Democrat who has been nominated for U.S. Senate in Texas. His name is James Talarico, and there appears to be no end at all to his extremism and downright nutty views. Last week, we reported to you that he believes there are 6 genders. Not 4, not 5, not 7, but specifically 6. Today, we're learning more about his views on abortion. Remember, this is a supposed Christian pastor who believes that God sent an angel to Mary to ask her if she wanted to have an abortion while she was pregnant with Jesus. I know it sounds crazy, but here is Talarico telling that story in cut number 5.
But I say all this in terms of, in context of abortion, because before God comes over Mary and we have the incarnation, God asks for Mary's consent, which is remarkable. I mean, go back and read this in Luke. I mean, the angel comes down and asks Mary if this is something she wants to do. And she says, if it is God's will, let it be done. Let it be. Let it happen.
This is how committed to abortion on demand that the Democrats are. They have put all their hopes and dreams into a man under the guise of Christian theology who believes God offered Mary an abortion, and he would like to offer you one as well. So I guess it should come as no surprise that Talarico once sent a letter on official Texas state legislative letterhead asking then President Joe Biden to transform federal facilities like military bases, post offices, and national parks into abortion clinics. Yes, you heard that right. Talarico asked Biden to open abortion clinics at post offices, national parks, and military bases. Let me read to you from the letter, dated June 24th, 2022. On behalf of my constituents, I urge you and your administration, you here is Joe Biden, to consider taking the following executive actions to protect the right to an abortion. Leasing federal property to abortion clinics on federal lands or in federal offices, prohibiting states from imposing restrictions on abortion through medication through the Food and Drug Administration, hiring abortion providers as federal employees to provide immunity from state lawsuits. The General Services Administration, Talarico writes, manages more than 800 federally owned or leased buildings in Texas alone. Just repurposing a small fraction of those spaces can provide critical, life-saving care to people across the state. We'll have to quibble with the term life-saving since the purpose of an abortion is to kill, literally kill, a human life. But I ask, do we think this is going to fly in Texas? A guy who looks like he's up past his bedtime fighting to open up an abortion clinic in your local post office, at your national park, at a military base, and doing it all under the guise of, well, you know, the Bible says God asked Mary if she wanted to have an abortion. I don't think so. The Democratic Party has become so divorced from average, regular, everyday men and Christians that this Talarico is what they think passes for both. They have no idea whatsoever, none, what average people, average men, or average Christians think or believe. And this is what their primary process crapped out as a result. This is what complete and total divorce from middle America actually looks like. And Democrats and their cheerleaders in the media are clapping like seals for it, just like they did when they saw Tim Walz's flannel shirts. Oh, gee whiz, here comes a real man. Well, that was when the jazz hands came out and the narrative crumbled. Now with Talarico, this is nothing short of insane, galaxy-brained extremism wrapped in a theology that is more focused on justifying political positions than in saving your or anyone else's soul. And that, friends, I think is bad for Christianity, bad for American politics, all at the same time. Not too many people can destroy their own credibility in two professions at once, but Talarico here has managed to do it. Scott Jennings, you're listening to this show on Salem. We appreciate your being with us today. By the way, if you'd like to go on vacation this November, and who wouldn't? It'll be cold by then. I encourage you to sign up for the Gulf of America cruise. It happens in November 2026. Turquoise water, white sand beaches, incredible food, and insightful conversations about the future of our country with me, I'll be there, and Mike Gallagher, he'll be there. We'll be diving into the issues shaping America as we cruise through these stunning destinations, and we're going to honor the 250th anniversary of our nation. Book your cabin today. Text the word cruise to 94878 or visit scottjenningsshow.com and click on the Gulf of America cruise banner. When we come back, Congressman Barry Moore of Alabama, also running for the United States Senate, is with us. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. More after this. You know, gold and silver recently soared to record highs and then pulled back. So are precious metals still a good buy? Many Wall Street experts predict higher prices ahead. Why? Well, because we still have trillions in national debt, a declining dollar, and inflation that keeps shrinking our savings. Even with corrections along the way, gold remains a historical hedge for wealth protection. That's why Morgan Stanley's chief investment officer ditched the 60-40 stocks and bonds portfolio and is recommending up to 20% in precious metals. They're getting educated, and you should too. Call Lear Capital at 1-800-880-2424 for your free gold investment kit and learn how you could qualify for up to $20,000 in bonus gold. Lear Capital has over $3 billion in transactions and thousands of five-star reviews. Call 1-800-880-2424, 1-800-880-2424, or visit learscott.com.
When he's not in the Oval Office or owning the libs on CNN, he's here with us. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
It is Monday, March the 9th. In just a moment, we'll be chatting with Congressman Barry Moore from Alabama, also a leading candidate for the United States Senate to replace Tommy Tuberville down there. But first, I have a message that every parent and, frankly, every grandparent needs to hear, and it is this. More kids are being targeted online through these gaming platforms, social media, and messaging apps. These companies profit from screen time and engagement, And oftentimes, predators are slipping through the cracks, and families are paying the price. Our friends and partners at Child Help hear from children every day who were contacted through games and apps. These are kids who were groomed, manipulated, or threatened by adults pretending to be someone else. One boy reached out to Child Help's chat hotline. He was terrified and he was ashamed because an adult that he met in an online game was demanding photos and threatening to lie to his parents if he did not comply. He didn't know what to do. Imagine being a young boy, a young child, and being attacked by an adult that way. Who knows? That chat may well have saved his life. And that is why Child Help matters. It's why I support Child Help personally. I personally donate. I am invested in this cause. And I'm asking you to do the same. Your donation does support life-saving programs. And what we're asking for is $27. Every $27 saves one child from abuse. If big tech won't protect our kids, we must. Donate at childhelp.org/Scott or text the word Child Help altogether to 94878 and give your $27 today. There is lots of news today. My first guest is here to discuss the Washington angle. He's running for the United States Senate seat held by Tommy Tuberville in Alabama, and he is endorsed for that by the president, the vice president, and several other members of Congress. Please welcome to the show a member himself, Congressman Barry Moore. Congressman, welcome into the Scott Jennings Show.
Hey, good afternoon, Scott. Great to be on with you, sir.
Well, I'm glad to have you. We had a little breaking news that came into us just during the commercial break, and I know you know this man, so I'm going to read it and let you comment. A member of the House Republican Conference named Kevin Kiley, who represents California, says that he is no longer a registered Republican, that he has changed his preference to no party preference in California. He says he'll continue to caucus with the Republicans for now, and then if he wins his race this fall, he'll assess who to caucus with in the next term, quote, based on what's best for his constituents. I know you know Representative Kiley. What can you tell us about this situation?
Well, Kevin sits next to me on the Judiciary Committee, and he's a friend, a conservative, and so, but with that redistricting, you know how aggressive some of these blue states have been, Scott, and they drew him in a pretty horrible district in California. And I can't help but wonder if he might be thinking down the road he may need to run as an independent to maintain his seat. I don't know. I was kind of shocked to hear that when you mentioned it to me before the break. But, it seems like to me I think he's trying to plan to run maybe as an independent to try to maybe swing some of the Democrats, because I don't know what that district went to in California, but the blue states are pretty good at making it hard on Republicans to get elected, and I think that's the battle Kevin's in now.
Well, if he plans to caucus with the Republicans for the rest of this Congress, that shouldn't make Speaker Johnson and the leadership team's job any harder, although it is quite hard already, although we'll keep an eye on that. Other breaking news, as you might have learned, Congressman, or might have heard, there was terrorism in New York City this weekend. We had two radical Islamic terrorists throwing an improvised explosive device into a protest in front of the mayor's office. Of course, we also had terrorism in Austin, Texas, just a couple of weeks ago. A radical Islamic terrorist killed 2 people and wounded several others in a shooting at a bar late at night on a Saturday night. All the while, the Department of Homeland Security remains closed because Democrats are voting to keep it closed. Tell us, Congressman, is this the height of irresponsibility to have DHS closed down while we face this terrorism in the United States?
Absolutely, Scott. I mean, the 4 years with the open border policies that we had under the prior administration, under Biden and Harris, we know now for sure that there were at least 330, maybe a few more known terrorists that came across that border, and that's the ones that we know about. And so we have those Muslim terrorists, those people that are on the watch list in this country, and for the Democrats to start playing politics with public safety, and it's all over this Minneapolis thing and the job that they're trying to do to clean up the fraud up there, that the Dems are pitching a fit and putting the American people's safety. They're putting their politics above the American people's safety. And so, yes, absolutely. And of course, we had that. Don't forget, we had the individual on the flight going into Florida from Nashville this weekend that jumped up and, he yelled Akbar, Allah Akbar, and then one of the guys tackled him on the plane. So we have some people in this country with the things that are going on in Iran right now, with the open borders we had the prior 4 years of this administration, certainly put American people at risk by not funding DHS.
Congressman, we're starting to get reports from numerous airports across the country that the shutdown at DHS, which is where the TSA is located, the Transportation Safety Administration, is affecting their operations. We had lines up to 5 hours in Houston. We've got the longest lines that people have ever seen in Atlanta. I'm not sure what airport you use to go back and forth to Washington from your district, but are you concerned that in Alabama we're going to start seeing very long lines and major impacts to everyday travelers because of the shutdown?
Yeah, it's a possibility. I mean, obviously, we'd love to get it resolved. I was hoping we'd have it done by the first of the month. If we can get DHS, the appropriations process done there, Scott, that'll be all 12 approach bills for the first time in 3 decades in this nation. We'll be using the regular order to appropriate funds to run the government. And the Democrats have picked this time in our history. Right now, we know the borders were open. Like I said, we know that we're at a war with Iran, where a lot of these extremists come from. And all of a sudden, it's like they want to use this to fight because we found fraud in Minneapolis. It's pretty telling of the Democrat Party. We could have this done and fund the government, no more CRs, no more omnibuses at Christmas, the gift that keeps giving, if they would just go ahead and let us do regular order. The thing is, these approach bills came through committees. So they've been vetted. They've been voted on by both Republicans and Democrats to get to the floor, and now they're playing politics.
That's Congressman Barry Moore from the state of Alabama, also a candidate for the United States Senate. Congressman Moore, let's talk about the war in Iran. We see near air superiority for the United States and for our allies Israel in this war. We've seen Iran pick a new Ayatollah, who is the son of the previous supreme leader of Iran. Based on everything you've heard from the administration, based on your observations, how are you feeling about the war effort so far?
Well, I think it's moving along pretty well. The briefs I've gotten, obviously, I think we're moving with a plan that Hegseth has laid out. The Department of War is executing that plan. Back to the midnight hammer when we took out Iranians' nuclear capabilities in 30 short hours or so. The president told them, says, do not try to build nuclear weapons. Do not try to get back into enriched uranium. Don't try to get that 60% stuff. And they went right back to doing what we told them. And he said the next time, if you do this, it's going to be harder on you the next time. And so the president is not one to make idle threats. And so when he tells you something, and he's a great negotiator now, but when he asks you to do something and you continue to push, then he will respond in the appropriate action. And look, Iran's been at war with us for a long, long time. You go back to Cole, the barracks in Beirut. Those guys have been chanting death to America for a long, long time. And certainly the attacks on Israel. And then to me, the slaughtering of 32,000 liberty-loving Iranians, that to me was just the final nail in the coffin, if you will, followed or just preceded by the October 7th attacks on Israel. I mean, they asked for this in some kind of way, but they've been after us for a long time. They've been at war with us for a while. And I think what we're doing now, executing a plan, shows that the president is serious and that we want peace in that region, and we're not going to tolerate terrorists and these proxy wars that they've been funding with Hamas and Hezbollah. Those sort of things you just can't do on this president's watch, and I'm thankful for the leadership he's showing.
Congressman, you sit on the Agriculture Committee, and I believe last week the committee advanced the Farm Bill, which is important to a lot of people in rural and middle America. We haven't passed a farm bill in this country, I think, since 2018. What do you think? Can we get a farm bill across the line in the House? Can we get something passed by this Congress this year?
Yeah, I think so, Scott. We had a bill last year. The Dems killed it in the Senate, but now, or the year before. But now that we have the majority in the Senate and in the House, I think that we'll have an opportunity. This farm bill, it does the things that are much needed to bring food security to this country. And look, the producers are in a tough spot. I mean, they've had a tough few years with inflation. We printed money on the prior administration like drunk sailors, and that's actually an insult to drunk sailors. So inflation hit those guys, and they're commodity-based pricing, and so their input costs went up. So we've got to get these producers something that they can take to the lenders to put a seed in the ground and produce food for America. And I think this farm bill does that. It's a step in a great direction. Again, it shows the Republican Party, even with a 1 or 2 vote majority, we're delivering on the appropriations process. We're delivering on legislation that's important for our people that we represent. And I'm honored to be a part of that, and glad to be on Ag Committee and glad to see that thing go to the Senate.
That voice you're hearing today, Congressman Barry Moore of Alabama, running for the United States Senate this year. There is a primary going on. However, you have the support of President Trump and Vice President Vance. You have the support of a number of members of Congress as well. Why did you decide to jump from the House to the Senate? And tell us, how's the primary unfolding?
So, Scott, we had to pray pretty hard about it. I've got the 1st Congressional District in Alabama, which is one of the most conservative districts in the nation, from the Gulf of America to the eastern shore of Alabama over to Georgia. And so really for us, it was a tough decision. I was the first elected official in the nation to endorse Donald Trump August 21st, 2015 in Lamb People Stadium. And that's been 11 years. And he asked us to run for Congress. We got in that fight. And then when Coach decided that he wanted to run for governor of Alabama, he has a 95 Liberty score, and I got a 96. I'm a member of House Freedom Caucus. So all my conservative friends started saying, Barry, you really need to consider this. So put it to a lot of prayer, but we've been so pleased. We've gotten Jim Jordan's endorsement. We've been rolling out turning points today, vice president, president. And the conservatives in the nation are with us in this fight. The people in our state love Donald Trump. And so we're pleased with where we're at. We're going to run through the tape on May 19th and would love to win this thing without a runoff, hopefully.
Congressman, we've got about 30 seconds. I'm interested, when you're out campaigning and talking to Republican voters, what is the number one thing or issue that they're bringing up to you on the campaign trail?
God, it has to be the SAVE Act. I'm hearing so much about securing American elections, and I think that if you know this, I mean, you've been in this world for a while, that it polls, even with Democrats, people want American citizens electing American leaders for American priorities. And so it's kind of an America First thing, but even the Democrats support it. And so I think that's the issue right now. Obviously, the debt and affordability, we're working on that, trying to get some of these these inflationary things that were a result of the prior administration under control with what we're doing on policy. But right now, the SAVE Act, affordability, continue to fight to secure the border and get these criminals out of this country.
That's Congressman Barry Moore of the state of Alabama. He's in the House. He's looking to go to the United States Senate. Congressman, thanks for being with us here on the Scott Jennings Show. Quick word from our friends and partners at Patriot Mobile. You know, every day we all make choices that shape our country's future, including who to patronize, and that includes which cell phone company, which cell phone provider to support. Most people don't realize that Patriot Mobile is not just a top-tier cell phone provider. They are on the front lines defending our freedoms, and they were doing it long before it was cool. The best part is, I tell you this, and I tell you the truth, they deliver prioritized premium service on all 3 major U.S. networks. It gives you the same or even better coverage, and they are backed by a 100% U.S.-based customer support team. You get unlimited data, you get hotspots, you get everything you could possibly need. Keep your number, keep your phone, or get a new phone. I don't care. I just want you on Patriot Mobile because they support your values. Take a stand. Go to patriotmobile.com/Scott or call 972-PATRIOT and use promo code Scott for a free month of service. Switch over to Patriot Mobile. I promise you, you will not regret it. When we come back, we talk about dignified remains transfer. It happened this weekend. Stay with us.
Hey, it's Scott, and I'm so excited to welcome Crowd Health as a new partner to the Scott Jennings Show. For several years, I'm hearing more people voicing frustration with traditional health insurance. Bad incentives baked into Obamacare have sent costs soaring. The rules are a maze of jargon, and people feel stuck. That's why I want to tell you about my new partner, Crowd Health. Crowd Health isn't insurance. It's a community that cuts out the middleman to help one another fund medical expenses, giving you more freedom, fewer surprises, and greater control over your healthcare choices. And when it comes to cost, members are spending hundreds less per month compared to traditional insurance. Right now, you can get started for just $99 per month for your first 3 months when you use the code SCOTT. Go to joincrowdhealth.com. That's joincrowdhealth.com and use code SCOTT. Again, joincrowdhealth.com, code SCOTT. Quick reminder, Crowd Health is not insurance. You can opt out, take your power back, and that is how we win.
The man who made CNN safe for conservatives again. Here's Scott Jennings.
And thank you for listening here on Salem. It is Monday, March the 9th. At Dover Air Force Base in Delaware over the weekend, the families of 6 soldiers who were lost during Operation Epic Fury watched as the bodies of their loved ones returned home. Major Jeffrey O'Brien, Chief Warrant Officer Robert Marzin, Captain Cody Cork, and Sergeant First Class Nicole Amor, and Sergeant First Class Noah Teachins, and Sergeant Declan Cody. All were killed by an Iranian drone strike on Kuwait on March the 1st, and all 6 were assigned with the 103rd Sustainment Command, an Army Reserve unit out of Iowa. And today, we have learned a 7th service member died from his injuries in this same attack. The military has identified him as Army Sergeant Benjamin Pennington, age 26, of Glendale, Kentucky, my home state. President Donald Trump, First Lady Melania Trump, and Vice President J.D. Vance joined families on the tarmac Sunday to honor these brave souls. Here's Vice President Vance talking this morning to a group of firefighters about what that was like in cut number 8.
And I had never done that before, and a lot of you served our nation in uniform. I know a number of our firefighters have all across our country. And I just want to say that if you are the praying type, and I certainly am, I hope you'll spare a prayer for the 6 souls that we lost, for the 7th soul who will be coming home tonight, and for all of their families.
Joining us now to discuss this somber and powerful moment is Chris Lovell. Chris is a retired Marine Corps major. He's now CEO of Lovell Government Services. Chris, you served for 24 years. Thank you, sir, for protecting us and our freedoms. And you have also worked with military families who have lost loved ones in service to our nation. I was hoping you might give us your thoughts as you watch this dignified remains transfer over the weekend.
Yeah, thanks, Scott. And yeah, it's a solemn time. The dignified transfer is a ceremony that has taken place at Dover since 1955. It's where they are processed for mortuary affairs right there in Delaware. And you know, when I watch that on TV, it's a national, really where we pause and nationally remember these heroes who gave the ultimate sacrifice. You know, they voluntarily, you know, put themselves in harm's way, and they voluntarily said, "I'll sacrifice my comfort for your freedom." And so I pause to remember them, and I can't help but think of, you know, witnessing, you know, and interacting with families who have lost loved ones, you know, in conflict. It's, you know, I think about the mothers and the daughters and the fathers and the parents who have been notified before they, you know, before the remains are transferred to Dover. And the goal of the Department of Defense, Department of War, is to have those military members' remains back to the families and loved ones as quickly as possible. But I think about what happens before they're actually here. They, you know, the casualty assistance officer has to notify the families. And so that is an unimaginable event where you have to tell a family member they've lost their dad or their son and or their mother. Right? And there's a lot of emotions that happen with that. The family goes from, you know, maybe woken up in the middle of the night to unbelief, and then they're going to ask, the casualty assistance officer has to tell them based on what they know, what happened, because that's the next thing that happens. There's shock, and then they ask, how did it happen? And so these casualty assistance officers are military members that help the family through that process.
Yeah, it's incredibly emotional. When I worked for President Bush back in his second term, I was on a few trips with the president where, you know, he would routinely meet with the families of the fallen from that war at that time, and the emotions are just incredible. And at the same time that they're processing the emotion of having lost someone, a son or a husband or an uncle or a brother, they're also having to deal with what that means functionally, systemically, with the Department of Defense. These casualty assistance officers, tell us about the critical role that they play in making sure the families are fully taken care of with what it means to have had someone serve, have them die, and everything that happens to a family after that.
Yeah, great question, Scott. So they are, you know, they're there on the doorstep initially to inform the families of the tragic event. And then, you know, they walk through the process from, you know, grieving with them to really kind of walking them through the logistics of what happens next with you know, funeral arrangements, to benefits, you know, to you know, honor guard for the ceremony. Where do you want to have the funeral? Do you want it at Arlington? Do you want it in your hometown? And then everything that goes along with that. And, you know, life doesn't stop. A lot of times these casualty assistance officers are having to coordinate just simple things like
they have more to,
just meeting.
yeah, they have more to do, and they may have more families to assist as the war effort goes on. Chris, we have to take a hard break here, but I really appreciate your time about giving us a briefing on this. It's a somber moment for our country. More on Salem with Scott Jennings after this. It is Monday, March the 9th. Let's take a quick spin through the headlines. New polling from NBC News this weekend shows Americans still trust Republicans over Democrats by 12 points when it comes to immigration. On the issue of crime, the GOP led Democrats by 22 points, and on border security, Republicans led by 27 points. On the issue of the economy, the two parties were tied. The same poll, incidentally, tested a number of people and institutions for popularity. The two at the bottom were the Democratic Party and Iran. Out in California, Los Angeles, a man is dead, murdered by a homeless person while the victim was trying to charge up his electric vehicle. And now his family is suing the city for $40 million. The victim is 68-year-old Reynaldo Lafont. He was stabbed, and then when the ambulance arrived to take him to the hospital, another second homeless person stole the ambulance and drove away. Lafont died at the scene. Only in Gavin Newsom's California, folks, where the governor has been promising to solve the homeless crisis there for well over 10 years. But as Newsom gropes for a new political identity as he ramps up a presidential campaign, things are not going so well. That same NBC poll from above shows just 27% of Americans have a favorable view of him, and already 45% have an unfavorable view. That is 18 points underwater. Baseball is back. Spring training is in full swing, and so is the World Baseball Classic. Did you see Team USA defeat Great Britain 9-1 on Saturday night? Slugger Kyle Schwarber made like Washington at Yorktown and dropped this bomb on the Brits to put the Americans up for good. Cut 12.
Schwarber launches it to right. He's done it against the Brits again. The United States takes the lead on a blast to the upper deck.
Ah, what a shot. That's Fox Sports' Joe Davis on the call. Game being played there in Houston. Now, I made my English bulldog, Elvis, watch that game with me Saturday night. He was none too pleased to see his countrymen taking it on the chin. Team USA faces Mexico tonight at 8 o'clock there in Houston. At least 6 people are dead, 12 more injured after tornadoes ripped Michigan and Oklahoma this weekend. Killed in it all a mother and a daughter in Oklahoma and a 12-year-old little boy in Michigan. Pray for their families. And all the while this is going on, Democrats have the Department of Homeland Security shut down. That's where you find FEMA. Seems like we should be doing something about that about now. And last week, the president held a policy meeting on something called the Ratepayer Protection Pledge. He pitched this in the State of the Union. Companies expected to sign on to the pledge include Google, Microsoft, Meta, Oracle, XAI, OpenAI, and Amazon. Here to discuss that is our friend Patrick Hedger, Director of Policy for Net Choice. Patrick, welcome back to the show. Tell us, what is this Ratepayer Protection Pledge, and what was the president doing with this meeting last week?
Yeah, so this is a really exciting thing that the president is doing. What the Ratepayer Protection Pledge does is it says those companies that you listed agree to build, bring, or buy new generation resources and cover the cost of all power delivery infrastructure upgrades required for their data centers. Right now, data centers are taking a lot of the blame for really bad electricity policy over the last several decades that's coming to a head and increasing rates for a lot of folks. So this is just a commitment to what a lot of these companies are already doing, elevating it at the federal level and ensuring folks know that data centers are not the culprit behind rising electricity costs.
Yeah, Patrick, a Politico poll that they published last week found that voters' top concerns about data centers really revolve around household costs. Voters were asked about the drawbacks to building data centers, and 29% said it would mean higher electric bills, 24% said it would increase the likelihood of blackouts, and 23% said the projects would cost taxpayer money. What do everybody from the president to these companies that need the data centers need to do to turn around this public perception, because it's fairly pervasive out there?
Yeah, and the administration's been working hard on this. A study that came out of the Lawrence Berkeley National Labs and the Department of Energy looked at what has been causing the actual increases that we've seen in electricity prices. Because in the states with the concentration of the most data centers, Virginia, Arizona, and Texas, those states' electricity rates have actually increased below the national average of the increase. So if the data centers were the problem, you would see major increases in those states. But what's really happening is we have really bad policies related to the permitting for new transmission lines, policies shutting down existing coal and natural gas plants, and transitioning to new types of plants, as well as renewable portfolio mandates, so renewable energy mandates at the state level that are all kind of coming into play at the same time. Those were found to be primarily responsible for increasing electricity rates, while data centers are actually making investments in the grid that are helping lower rates.
Patrick, at the moment, I think about 4 to 6% of the energy grid goes to data centers, although there are some reports that by 2028, this could be as high as 12%. How do those numbers strike you? Does that feel accurate to you? And should people be worried if one specific thing is that big a percentage of our energy grid?
I don't think folks should be worried, because what's a big part of this ratepayer protection pledge is the federal government committing to help companies make investments to make the grid more reliable and put more electrons on the grid, right? Generate more power. And what's really exciting is that these are companies that are sitting on trillions of dollars, in capital, that are able to actually make these investments, right? And that's what the ratepayer protection pledge commits them to do, is actually bringing power to the grid in the future. But forget AI for a second, forget data centers. If we want to bring back manufacturing to this country, if we want to build more homes for people, residential AC is still by far the number one consumer of electricity in this country. And so we need more power for all of the above.
Patrick, I read off a list of large tech companies and organizations that are signing on to the Ratepayer Protection Pledge. Is there anybody missing from this right now that you think needs to come in to the fold and join the president's effort?
Yeah, so any company that is building data centers, building the hyperscale data centers, I think would be well served by committing to this. Again, what the president is doing is elevating a lot of what's already happening, what is codified in state law and what the companies themselves have agreed to do, and giving the platform of the White House to help reassure folks that America winning the 21st century, winning the AI race, is not going to come out of their pocketbooks.
You know, Patrick, at the local level, it strikes me that one of the biggest political debates, biggest political fights going on in this country are over these data centers. There are governors and other national policymakers out there that are talking up AI and talking up the need for data centers. And then at the very, very local level, you have people trying to build them, and a lot of local folks who are turning up to oppose them. Sometimes they get built, sometimes they don't. Do you think that national political leaders need to give more air cover, if you will, to some of these very local fights? I mean, ultimately, if we're going to win the AI race and it's going to help ultimately expand the American economy, we have to build these data centers. But there's a lot of fights going on out there, and they're not all being won.
Yeah, I think any help would be needed at this, because the data centers are so important for not just AI, but any sort of data processing, web hosting, things like that. You want to live in this 21st century world where you have the convenience of everything that's on your phone, from your pictures of your kids to your health records, to being able to access a suite of services, order an Uber, for example, order a package from Amazon. All of these things run through a data center. And so if you don't have the infrastructure that backs up the web economy, you're going to cede that future to China, where they are building these things at a rapid scale, and they do have companies that can compete with American companies.
That voice you're hearing, Patrick Hedger of Net Choice. He's our policy guru on tech and AI and data centers. Patrick, we expect to hear from you in the future. Thanks for joining us. We're going to take a break here on the Scott Jennings Show, talk about Iran. They picked a new Ayatollah, a new supreme leader. We'll talk about that with Jeanette and Saya from the Foundation for Defense of Democracies when we come back. It's Common Sense for the American People. I'm Scott Jennings. You're on Salem. Stay with us.
If the leftists haven't had enough yet, there's more. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
It is Monday, March the 9th. Let's check in on what's going on with Operation Epic Fury. To chat with us about that, Yonatan Seya, research analyst at the Foundation for the Defense of Democracies. He is an expert on the Middle East and also on China, and in this case, these two matters are definitely linked. Yonatan, welcome into the Scott Jennings Show.
Hi, it's great to be with you.
Yeah, thanks for the call today. And the news today is that the Iranian regime has announced that Mojtaba Khamenei, who is the son of the previous Ayatollah, has been chosen rather as the supreme leader of Iran. When you heard that news, were you surprised? What can you tell us about this new Khamenei?
I don't think any of us were surprised, given that the regime has had no contingency plan except immediate family of the supreme leader. I think it says a lot about their capabilities that they have to opt out for a hereditary succession. Now, it tells us that this new guy has great ties to the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, the main ideological entity that has been leading this war. It's going to tell us that Tehran is choosing to escalate instead of signaling compromise to the United States.
Okay, so Americans have been watching the U.S. military and the Israeli military absolutely pound Iranian positions for over a week now. We've taken out government facilities. We bombed the building where the clerics were meeting. We were said to have taken out the bunker that was underneath the Ayatollah's offices, the secure bunker. They thought there were some regime officials down there. In your opinion, how much disarray is there in the Iranian government? Is this thing teetering on the brink of collapse? Are they stronger than we think? Kind of give us an idea, after a week of war, where you think they stand in terms of sort of internal stability.
Well, when it comes to their military capabilities, I don't think we by any means overestimated that. I think you're talking about a very fragile regime that only had missiles, had no air force, had no naval force. So that's on one hand. But when it comes to their internal apparatus, listen, this is a regime that has more than one figurehead. They have parallel institutions. So if you want to talk about regime collapse in this context, it's not just about taking out the command structure, which we've done a great job at, by the way. As you noted, we've taken out every senior person there is. But it's really about coming down to the mid-level, lower-level people. These targeted assassinations really need to go on in higher in numbers. So we've taken out the infrastructure, but the personnel remain, and that's going to be the next phase of the war.
The president, Yonatan, has repeatedly said he wants the people of Iran to rise up and take back their country. Is there any evidence that that is happening? Before the war, we saw protesters in the streets by the thousands. We also saw the regime slaughter people by the tens of thousands. Where do you think that stands now? Is there going to be a popular uprising in Iran while they have the air cover to do it?
Without a doubt, there will be, but we need to specify what the president said. The president told Iranians to stand by. He said once the bombing stops, it'll create an opportunity for them to rise up. But we're not at that point yet. He's repeated it a couple of times now. The opposition leader, the Crown Prince Pahlavi, has also stated the same notion that right now it is not safe because the bombing campaign is still extensive. But once that is done and once there's a power vacuum, that's when we have to see masses coming out. You're right to point out January, we saw millions there. We hope to see millions again because it's going to be a numbers game against these brutal dictators that are going to open fire on their own people.
Talk about the price of oil briefly. There was some concern last night and this morning about oil futures. A barrel topped $100 a barrel. It looks to me like, just checking it here, it's down to about $92. So we've had some drop throughout the day. This, of course, is related to the fact that the Strait of Hormuz is impacted by these military operations. What's your expectation on oil, the price of oil, what American consumers can expect over the next few days?
Well, it's probably going to fluctuate up and down. We have to remember the war in Ukraine had similar consequences in the early stages, but as it went on, the prices calmed down. Now, you're right to point out the Strait of Hormuz because it's, of course, the main chokehold that most of the energy supplies go through. But that said, because Iranian oil itself has been sanctioned for so long, the absence of Iranian oil is not going to be something new. Therefore, the shock that the market is experiencing right now is because of the war and is not because of the limits on supply. So I do think it's a temporary measure. I think once things calm down a little bit, we're going to have to see how the prices are going to drop. But again, it's nothing new. There's something to be expected. If anything, it took too long for the prices to skyrocket.
All right, that voice you're hearing, Yonatan Sayah, research analyst at the Foundation for Defense of Democracies, expert on the Middle East and China. Yonatan, we'll have you back, I'm sure, in the near future as the Operation Epic Fury continues. We're going to take a break. When we come back, National Republican spokesperson, former, now kind of a Republican influencer, interesting person, Elizabeth Pipko is coming by to talk news of the day. It's Scott Jennings here, Common Sense for the American People. Stay with us.
Saving Western civilization, one busted leftist narrative at a time. It's the Scott Jennings Show.
It is Monday, March the 9th. Common Sense for the American People. Scott Jennings is here, broadcasting from New York City today. And we're watching all the breaking news. We're watching all the stupid stuff coming out of the Democrats today, which is voluminous. Here to discuss it all is my friend Elizabeth Pipko. For the last 10 years, Elizabeth has been working for Donald Trump, both officially and on campaigns and in political apparatus. She was the national spokesperson for the Republican National Committee last year and also for the Trump campaign. Elizabeth, welcome into the Scott Jennings Show. Glad to have you here today.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, really happy to see you. We've got a lot going on, so let's start here. A little bit of breaking news. I'm seeing video now of Jay Clayton, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District of New York, announcing federal charges against two guys, Emir Balat and Ibrahim Qayyumi. These are the people who, I think, through the improvised explosive devices in front of Gracie Mansion this weekend, they said they were inspired by ISIS. It's the second kind of terrorist attack, Elizabeth, I think we've seen in the United States in the last couple of weeks. We had one in Austin, Texas, just a couple of weekends ago, yet the Department of Homeland Security remains shut down. What do you make of the Democratic position here? We're at war, we have terrorism, but because of their position on immigration, Democrats simply won't open the Department of Homeland Security.
Well, it's a combination of their actual position on immigration and their position on opposing anything that Donald Trump does, which is why we're in the mess that we're in, with our country successfully striking one of our greatest threats in the last few decades, and most Democrats actually vocalizing their opposition to this, despite claiming for years this is what they wanted to do. This was the correct thing to do. It's also a problem, I'd say, for New Yorkers that they have one of the furthest left Democrats that exist right now in power there. If you're in New York City, you are dealing with a man who loves socialism and communism and has no interest in criticizing Hamas, in really criticizing anything that really is an enemy of the United States of America is probably the best way to describe it. That's the saddest position. So I'd say it's not just a Democrat problem, it's a far left progressive problem that's kind of taken over the Democrat Party. And unfortunately, I had to leave New York. A lot of my friends did as well. But what's happened to what I think was the greatest city on the face of the earth in the last few years, but especially the projection that it's going to get only worse, I'd say, over the next few years of Mamdani'S rule. I think that's the real problem, obviously, for the Democrat Party, for every decent person in our country that's left and doesn't want to see this happen.
You know, this story of these terrorists in New York City this weekend is incredible. So you had a protest going on in front of Gracie Mansion. You had a counter-protest, and these two radical Islamic jihadis drive up from Pennsylvania, and they have these improvised explosive devices. I think they found 3 of them now. But if you look at the initial statements that came out of both Mamdani and other Democrats, and toss on a lot of media outlets, you would have never known the truth of what happened. They worked very hard this weekend to make it seem like Islamophobes or Republicans or someone other than who did it had actually committed the terrorist act. It is amazing to me that they just can't be honest with the American people. We do have radical Islamic terrorists in our midst, and we have to call it out, and we have to tell people the truth about it. Why won't they, Elizabeth?
Well, they can't, because it goes against their narrative, right? Because we've been saying this is a problem for many years now. Obviously, these 2 kids, I believe one of them, if not both, actually pledged their support for ISIS as they were being handcuffed. I mean, we know exactly what this was. This was not a kid misbehaving, as I'm sure they're going to try to claim. This was someone who was radicalized online, someone who I believe, if I'm not mistaken, actually traveled to Turkey recently, came back and decided he was going to act in, the support of ISIS and try to harm people in New York. Thank God those bombs did not go off. But like you said, no one even knows that this happened. I have friends in New York who I had to explain this to this morning because they had no idea. They had heard a totally opposite story. They were asking me if I'm okay with those on the conservative side coming with bombs to protest. And I had to explain that that's the opposite of what had happened. Obviously, if you follow the mayor as well, he put out a long post today, and you would again have no idea what had happened if you read that post. It was blamed on Republicans. It was blamed on some really prominent conservative media faces in New York as well. And most people are going to forget that this ever happened. So I think the problem is really not even the terrorists in our country. It's the Democrats, it's the media that want to cover for them and make sure that they come out ahead, even if Americans are literally getting hurt in the process.
Yeah, you used the right word. It's about narratives. And when things happen, they create these narratives. And it's really incredible to me how fast narratives can spread on the left, and of course they spread online. And they're very authoritarian in their messaging. They get everybody on the message, and if you get off message, they come for you immediately. And in this case, I think you're right. I think a lot of people have immediately been convinced that this was some right-wing terrorism, when in fact it was left-wing radical Islamic terrorism. Thank goodness the feds have arrested these folks. I'll ask you one more question about the Mamdani situation here, and I'm going to ask you about his wife, the First Lady of New York City. There have been dozens and dozens and dozens of posts that have been discovered online where she was liking posts that were celebrating October the 7th, that massacre that happened in Israel. She was calling it a rape hoax online. I mean, obviously, she was expressing solidarity and jubilee with the terrorists and what they had done on October the 7th. What do you make of this? I remember a couple of years ago, we had to live through the whole frenzy where Samuel Alito's wife had hung up a George Washington flag on their front porch, and the entire left and media went crazy. Are the mayor's wife's social media interactions here fair game for people to talk about?
Well, they're 100% fair game, but the problem is that we're pretending that this is a surprise, right? A bunch of people are not saying that, oh, this is not surprising at all. We know that he holds the same views. They're instead pretending that he is this innocent man who's married to someone who's completely off limits, and that very, very often in these high-profile relationships, the husband and wife don't discuss their political beliefs, and they might hold very different values, and it's irrelevant what she thinks. When in reality, not only is it not irrelevant what you think, but I think you and I and how many other people have said that these are his beliefs as well. Mamdani has not really fought the allegations at all over the last few years of campaigning that he does not share the exact same beliefs. When I saw this, I was wondering why it was a major story today when I had seen those likes. We'd all discussed this many, many months ago, if not years ago at this point. So I think the narrative, again, is the problem. We're wondering if it's off limits to discuss her posts. Why are we not wondering the fact that he literally agrees with everything that she said? He probably has the exact same post that he had to hide before running, and we all know these are the exact views of the current mayor of New York City. I don't really care what his wife believes.
That voice you're hearing, Elizabeth Pipko, she former spokesperson for President Trump and his campaign in the Republican National Committee, now a prominent national conservative commentator. Elizabeth, I want to play a clip of our Secretary of State, Marco Rubio. I'm going to play this, by the way, because I keep going on television with people who keep saying things to me like, well, we've never heard the administration say what the rationale for the war in Iran is. We've never heard any explanation about this at all. And yet I keep hearing Marco Rubio and the president and everyone else say the same thing over and over again. It makes me wonder if we're living on two different planets. Let's hear Rubio in Cut 11.
The goals of this mission are clear, and it's important to continue to remind the American people of why it is that the greatest military in the history of the world is engaged in this operation. It is to destroy the ability of this regime to launch missiles, both by destroying their missiles and their launchers, destroy the factories that make these missiles, and destroy their navy.
All right, pretty clear goals here, and I want to get your thoughts on, the Democratic talking point that A, this is an unnecessary war, and B, there are no objectives. And I also want to get your views on Rubio. The president says he's the best Secretary of State we ever had. You agree with that?
I do agree with that. I'm a major fan of Marco Rubio, and I think he does a brilliant job and has, especially these last few weeks when talking about Iran. But again, we're living on two different worlds, like you just said, because Democrats, who used to have some kind of common sense before Donald Trump ran for office and destroyed their brains, have also laid out exactly why Iran is an enemy and why this might have to be a move that the United States makes. We all used to agree on this. You shouldn't need Marco Rubio to explain it, because most common sense Americans actually understand that Iran has been not only a threat, but a major enemy for decades now that has harmed, tortured, kidnapped, murdered countless American lives, that they cannot have a nuclear weapon, that they are a threat to the United States. So again, it has nothing to do with Marco Rubio, who, again, like you said, if you want to miss the explanations from the administration, you can, but they've been put out by J.D. Vance, Marco Rubio, Caroline Leavitt, Donald Trump, countless others. But again, most Democrats, most Americans for years agreed on this fact and laid out the exact same realities that Marco Rubio is laying out right now. So it is a lie if anyone says to you that this is news to them or doesn't understand exactly why these strikes have to be necessary.
Elizabeth Pipko is our guest, conservative commentator, former spokesperson for President Trump. Other news, this is just coming out in the last few minutes. Prominent sports and cultural commentator, I guess, Stephen A. Smith has said he's ruling out a White House bid in 2028. In fact, he said he'd back Rubio over some top Democrats if that were the way it shook out. He said, quote, "Let me put the presidential aspirations to bed." This was on the premiere episode of the Hangout with Sean Hannity podcast. He said, "If I have to give up my money, it's not happening." Elizabeth A., do you take Stephen A. Smith at his word? And B, do you think Democrats are more likely to nominate a politician, or are they more likely to go outside that and nominate someone like Smith, who comes from outside the party, but of course brings a huge following into a campaign?
You know, I was actually baffled when it was still being talked about quite a bit that he might run for office. I was watching The View, I'm sure everybody's favorite show, and they were very, very upset about this. They thought it was absolutely asinine that someone without decades of political experience could go in and believe that they were worthy of that nomination and of the Oval Office. And I think they're just so out of touch with the average American and what people are looking for, what people are attracted to and interested in. I think that was the biggest sign for me that they have no idea what wins elections. But no, I don't think they would have any chance of nominating someone with a personality, somebody who can't be controlled, someone who can't really follow along blindly with that narrative, someone who has a following based on their actual genuine opinions about things and isn't just another, machine that they've built with this Democrat operation for years. So no, I would say right now they're looking at a Gavin Newsom, even maybe a Kamala Harris before they would ever risk it all with someone they can't control like Stephen A.
Well, we could be so lucky to see Kamala Harris back on the national ticket, Elizabeth. One last person I want to ask you about, James Talarico, the Democrat candidate running for Senate in Texas. Let's listen to this weird exchange he had on a podcast. Cut number 4, please.
Something that you love that's not family or friends.
I love, I'm just saying this because it's on my mind, the trans children who showed up yesterday at the state capitol to advocate for their humanity. They shouldn't have to, but it was an inspiration to watch.
Elizabeth, when you get asked to name things that you love, A, is that where your mind goes? B, little creepy, right?
Extremely creepy. But I'm going to give him a little bit more credit than I think many are giving him. I think this was planned, and he wanted it to go viral. Again, he wanted conservatives to post about it and to attack him so that he could gain with a little bit of support and, followers and views and recognition, because a lot of people in the country still don't know who he is. He's one of the strangest characters I've seen come up from the Democrat side, but just like he played Stephen Colbert and made sure that he beat Jasmine Crockett with, the attention he got from that interview that apparently Donald Trump banned from anyone ever seeing, this was the exact same thing. I think he knows what goes viral. He knows exactly what he's doing.
Elizabeth Pipko, thanks for joining us on the Scott Jennings Show. We'll have you back soon. You're a great guest. Coming up next, we're going to explore more about the war in Iran. First, I do want to give you a message from our friends at the International Fellowship from Christians and Jews. They're obviously watching Operation Epic Fury intensify. You have missile strikes going on in Israel, and now is the time for you to stand with Israel's most vulnerable, the sick, the elderly, the children, the families. They all depend on the fellowship at times like these. People in the Holy Land are depending on our prayerful support. We can stand with Israel in prayer today by visiting supportifcj.org. They provide life-saving aid to folks in the Holy Land. They need our prayers and they need our support. I'm doing it, supportifcj.org. One more break, and we'll talk more Iran after it's over. It's Scott Jennings on Salem. Stay with us.
Fighting the left with the best weapon we have, common sense. This is the Scott Jennings Show.
Rounding out the show today with more detailed coverage of Operation Epic Fury, an incredibly successful military campaign so far waged by the United States and Israel against the greatest state sponsor of terrorism in the world. The Iranians were unwilling to conduct faithful negotiations, and because of that, now they are facing an onslaught from air and sea. These strikes are strategic, not just to cripple Iran's nuclear program and destabilize their military and leadership, but also to kneecap one of China's closest partners in the region. In the Free Press last week, our next guest wrote an article called "The Iran Strike is All About China." Let's talk about this connection. This is very fascinating. Joining us is the author Zeneb Rabua, research fellow at the Hudson Institute and founder of It's China Project. Zeneb, thanks for joining us on the show here. I read your article, fascinating stuff. Please start here. Explain to our listeners the connection between Iran and China and why this strategic play by the United States makes a lot of sense.
Well, thank you very much for having me. Indeed, I think that people forget that Iran is really a central pillar of China's strategy in the Middle East. When someone thinks about the Belt and Road corridors, the Belt and Road Initiative of China, the Digital Silk Road, all these projects, they go through Tehran. And on top of that, there is also an oil dimension to it. The Chinese really rely heavily on, at least they rely on a bunch of discounts that the Iranians give them. 90% of Iran's oil goes to China. It's true that it's just 13% of China's, crude imports, but they are a huge discount that makes it very good for their own industrial base. And the third thing is that for a very long time, Iran was very good for Beijing's diplomatic business in the Gulf. People I think they forgot about how Beijing was the one that helped broker this deal of normalization between Saudi Arabia and Iran, and it helped Beijing get closer to Saudi Arabia, which is a key U.S. partner in the region. But now, because of all the things that are unfolding, well, it seems that China is actually kind of scrambling. They don't know what to say. Are they against the strikes? Are they for the strikes? And so they're taking a very diplomatic, it's very China too, it's very pragmatic approach. But they are struggling because the very purpose for which they brokered that deal, the normalization, well, they can't really ask Iran to escalate. In fact, Iran has been striking more and more its own neighbors.
Zeneb, is it true that Iran uses Chinese-made military equipment? I'm asking because if it is, and you see what that equipment is able to do against the United States and against Israel, China must be looking at this and thinking, oh dear, we may have wandered into the wrong bar here in the Middle East. Tell us about that connection.
Yeah, I think it's totally true. They did use and they did buy a lot of equipment, but they even more so relied on a lot of chemicals that China provided so that they can make the missiles. A lot of those companies that provided the components, they were actually sanctioned by the United States. Since the Biden administration, but even more so during the Trump administration, they've been heavily sanctioned. Obviously, on the radars and other things. Well, it seems that the Chinese equipment is just not performing well. A lot of the drones. I mean, we will know more in a few days, or maybe in a few weeks, in a few years, maybe. But a lot of the drones have been intercepted and they've been weakened with a cyber attack by both the Israelis and the United States. So yes, there's a lot is going on for China. They've been trying to use that as a laboratory test to weaken U.S. and Israeli military posture, but I think it's backfiring.
That voice you're hearing, Zeneb Rabua. She is with the Center for Peace and Security in the Middle East at the Hudson Institute. And she wrote this article in the Free Press, and the headline was, "The Iran Strike is All About China." I highly encourage you to read it if you're interested in the global strategic play the United States is making here with Iran. Yes, it's about Iran, state sponsor of terror, but there's a lot going on with the connections with China. Zeneb, we'll have you back as we continue to watch Operation Epic Fury unfold. Close the show today. One final reminder, the Gulf of America cruise coming up in November. Get your cabin. I need to see you there. We're going to have a great time. Text the word cruise to 94878 or visit scottjenningsshow.com and click the banner. That's all for today. We'll be back tomorrow with more breaking news. I'm live in Florida. Great lineup tomorrow. It's Common Sense for the American people. See you then.